Hey everybody, I just gave the 5-minute warning to everybody over on Facebook, and so we'll have a few more people joining us. How are you doing? If there are questions right off the top of your head that you have been wondering about, you can put them over in the chat box, and I will take a look at them as we go. Let's see, we have Jennifer joining us. Let me get back over to Facebook just really quick. I am interested in whether or not any of you have ever homeschooled before. I'd like to know, is this like a first time? And maybe also what your level of fear is. And just FYI, everybody is afraid of getting started. And if you were here with me on, let's see, Wednesday, I compared it to having kids. You know, no one is prepared, even for their second kid or their third kid, because everybody's different, right? Every kid is different. And somehow you just manage, and, you know, eventually 18 years later, or however many years it takes, you realize, okay, we raised a kid. So for Brenda, first time homeschooling, Hong, you know what is really funny is that on my Survival Mom Facebook page, there was a mom that feels just like you. So she knows that she wants to homeschool, but she's terrified. And, you know, honestly, just like parenting, and last Wednesday or this past Wednesday, I told the story of, let me get all connected here with to Facebook now. But I told a story about, you know, my husband and I had the first baby, my daughter, and the time came where it was time to take her home. And we looked at each other and we had the same reaction. We could not believe the hospital was just letting us walk out of there with her. You know, it was like we still needed supervision. We didn't get any supervision. In fact, I remember she screamed so loud on the way home, we had to pull over into a parking lot, and I had to get in the back seat with her. And so that began 21 years of parenting this wonderful person. No training at all. You just jump in and you figure it out as you go. I'm connecting with Facebook, so just give me just 1 second. And for those of you that are parents, I have no doubt that you know exactly what it's like. And how many times as a parent have you wondered, I don't even know what I'm doing? You know, we now have this dilemma, we have that dilemma, you know, there's a fight between the kids, you know, how do I, you know, manage the, you know, do I need more discipline, less discipline? Yeah. So we're all in the same boat together. And it's kind of interesting how homeschooling is getting to be such a hot topic. What is really interesting, my sister may watch this at some point, I don't know, but my husband and I, we were the first people in both of our families to homeschool. So very much, you know, some kind of rebel. And I remember one of my family members, you know, telling me early on, you know, Lisa, I'm begging you, put your daughter in public school. And of course we didn't, you know, we knew better. I don't know, for my husband and I, we're both kind of the oldest in the family, and here my daughter comes along and she's the oldest, and I always felt sorry for her. She was the oldest of two oldests. What kind of a chance does that kind of a kid have, right? Yeah. So right now she just launched her first podcast, and if you want to give it a listen, I'm going to type the name right here. It's called The Art of Deceit.com. And in the homeschool world, and I'm just going to wait till Facebook gets caught up. In the homeschool world, teaching logic and philosophy is kind of, you know, depending on the curriculum, it is part of kind of what we do. And so my kids have both taken classes in logic and reasoning and learning about logical fallacies. And so it always fascinated my daughter. And so over the years of her just kind of ferreting out and identifying these logical fallacies, she is going to, she's made her podcast, her little website. Actually, I shouldn't say it's little, because actually she put it together herself, and it's going to grow. But the art of deceit is to help people of all ages. But I think she's going to zero in on younger people who, are very much influenced by, academia and just, the entire everything, in the culture and politics, of course. How do you know? Have you ever read something and thought, there's something wrong with that argument, but I don't know what it is? Okay, so she's going to walk people through and instruct them. Today she is working on a podcast from Monday all about ad hominem attacks. And so it's going to be, she just messaged me a little bit ago, Mom, my script is getting so long. So anyway, but yeah, if you're looking for something you want to add, if your kids are getting to the age of middle school, and definitely into high school, do look for curriculum, books, anything you can on helping them identify logical fallacies. And there's one called The Fallacy Detective. Let me type it here. If you're over on Facebook, I will see your questions and comments later. But if you want to be able to ask questions right now as we go and toward the end, then you need to get on the Zoom call. It's just, I can just see at a glance everything. So Brenda agrees, parenting is definitely a learn on the job. Yes, parenting, you want to give up at times, and with homeschooling, there will be times you want to give up. So just, letting you know that if that thought ever occurs to you, you're just going to be in very good company. All right. Basic preschool stuff. All right. Mildly worried, Brenda says, about record keeping. And record keeping depends on the state. Okay, so we happen to live in Arizona and then Texas, where there really are no stringent rules on record keeping. But in some states, let me type something here in the chat box. In some states, you are required to put together a portfolio, hslda.org. As I mentioned before, hslda.org. It is a Christian-based organization, but I don't know of any others that have lawyers, or in Texas, lawyers on staff. And in the event that, it could be anything, a relative that dislikes you and reports you to Child Protective Services. Okay, that's not unheard of. Whatever the situation might be, you will want very much to pick up the phone and call someone and say, hey, there is someone at my door and they want to interview my kid without me being around. And you need to know what your rights are. So for that reason, I don't get anything from HSLDA. We haven't belonged to it for a while. My kids are high school, they're in college now. But for that reason, I would recommend joining, just so you have that confidence. But also, it's a fantastic resource where you can look up the name of your state and you can find out what what are the laws, what are regulations that you have to go by. And that is really important in case, let's say someone from a school district sends you a letter and says, hey, you're in our district, we know you're homeschooling, but we're going to require these things of you. That happens a lot more often than you might think. And you need to know exactly what your state officially requires, because there are rogue school district administrators and principals who just take it upon themselves, maybe they're hostile to homeschooling or whatever. Maybe they think they're doing you a favor, but sometimes it's actually pretty common. So that's enough about HSLDA, but it's a good resource for finding out your state requirements as well as local homeschool groups. They won't all be listed there, but it would be a good place to get started. A word really quick before I get to all my notes is a word about homeschool groups. Okay. One weird characteristic of homeschooling, unless you're going to go the route of everything being planned for you, all right? You have a stack of books. you're given a weekly, a monthly schedule. You're told how many minutes, your child or children have to be basically at, a table or a desk somewhere. These are all the requirements. That's kind of very, very restrictive. However, some families choose that just because it really is, it's easy. It's easy. In some respects, it's not going to be easy. But it's hard for one homeschool family to tell another, this is how I do it, and you do it the same way. So I had a daughter who loved to read. I have a son who just discovered reading about in the last year and a half, when he discovered he could read books on how to get rich, okay? So, yeah, he's reading books on, I don't even know, Wall Street, Think and Grow Rich, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he's read all those. So once there was a topic that really hit him that he wanted to know about, he started discovering the love for reading. But if I were to go to a family and say, this is exactly how we're doing things, then it might not be a fit for you. Different kids, different ages, different family schedules, and everything else. But nevertheless, when homeschool moms, homeschool parents get together, there's a lot to talk about. And homeschool groups will typically meet in person on occasion. I do not know how this will be affected by the virus, okay? So everything is up in the air because of that. But typically, they'll meet once a week. Typically, they will plan field trips and have, different activities for different ages. So here in my town, we belonged to a homeschool group for a few years, and they had proms. They had a winter formal. They would take, kids down into Houston on field trips. They just had a lot going on, and there were about 500 families in this group. So there really was something for everybody. So I would recommend finding a homeschool group. Don't be too quick to join. All right. Just like you might not be too quick to join, something like, let's say, a bunco group or something. You might want to go, one or two times. I'm going to scoot this back a little bit. One or two times and see, is this a good fit for me? Do I really hit it off with these people? Do we have stuff in common? If you want a very secular based homeschool curriculum, then if you go to a group where it's Christian based, or Muslim, or a Jewish group, in fact, they have all kinds of groups, then you want to find the one where you really feel like, okay, I could fit into this group. So that's enough about that, HSLDA and homeschool groups. Let me pull up my notes. I did mention in an email that I sent out today something that really hit me just last night. I have two sisters, and I think most of you know that I was in the public school system for a long time. I was a teacher, 7th and 8th grade for several years, and then I taught 4th grade for another 3 years, I think, and then I was a school district trainer where I would go into classroom after classroom after classroom, watch teachers. A principal might come to me and say, Lisa, you need to go into Mrs. Let me find the last name here so I can pick on you, Mrs. Lamb, Mrs. Lamb's class, and she's been having some problems with, a couple of the boys in there. Okay, let's just say. So it'd be my job to go in there and kind of analyze what was going on and sit down and talk with her and hear her side of the story and what's working, what's not. And I also would do something called like demo lessons. So I would go into classrooms and I would teach like a model lesson of how things should go. And of course, being the stranger in the classroom, no one, was ever naughty. Everyone was on their perfect behavior. But it was an interesting job. However, my two sisters are still very much into public school. And so last night I was on Facebook, my sister messaged me and she said, I think we're going to homeschool. And I was really surprised because no one in my family homeschools or ever showed any kind of an interest in it. Our kids were not the black sheep. They were never treated differently, but their experiences growing up were very different from those of their cousins. So I realized as I was talking to her, she doesn't know what's going to happen. She's the school librarian. She doesn't know what's going to happen in the fall and into November and December and then into next semester. And so she said, I'm seriously thinking about homeschooling Ruby. So I'm curious, just real quick over in the chat box and over in Facebook, I'll read your comments later. But what are you hearing from your own school districts or your own schools? What are their plans for the fall? Just go ahead and type, and I'll just read a couple of these comments, and then you can read what other school districts are saying. And Ann Lamb, I am not surprised at all that logic was part of the curriculum in a private school. You know, it shows up nowhere in public schools, open sequence or curriculum anywhere. So, and it should. I'm glad that you said the same thing. So Jennifer is saying just a lot of uncertainty. All right. Here in Texas, masks are required of all students up through college, but I do not know at what age it begins. As far as I'm aware, if you put your kid into a public school in Texas, kindergarten, ooh, I hope it's not that young. I mean, it would be really difficult for the kindergarten teachers to deal with that. But that is, part of the plan. And then in the district that I live in, teachers are given like 3 options. One is to go to school, and they will be, publicly, around other kids and get that, that dose of, being around kids again. But others are, I think it's all at home, where you would take the distance learning, like that failed so miserably. I did not know this, I'm learning, but it failed. I guess the distance learning was really just kind of a failure, from coast to coast. In most cases, I'm sure it wasn't in all. And then they have a third option, and I don't remember what the third option was. So someone says, we're planning a mostly normal opening, but not for sure. There's no talk of masks. It's a private Lutheran school. We have about 45 students and about 10 teachers. Melissa, your situation may end up being a lot different, huh? It's easier to keep track of 45 students and 10 teachers, a handful of office staff, I would imagine. So Cheryl says it's up in the air, talking about part-time and staggering with masks, allowing you to choose to go to school or remote. Beth says, my district is allowing parents to choose regular school with a mask or online e-learning. So those seem to be just kind of the main options. But I want to tell you just really quickly, here in my town yesterday on Facebook, we were all kind of caught by surprise when a very, very popular restaurant, and I happen to have 3 gift cards to this restaurant, announced that they were shutting down. I don't know if it's permanent, I don't know if it's temporary, but the reason for shutting down is they had an employee test positive. Okay. So they're not only are they completely shutting down the restaurant, they're going to sanitize, they may have to close for good, depending on their financial status. But now another restaurant in town just this morning announced they're only going to be doing curbside pickup of food because one of their employees had been in touch with the employee at the other restaurant. These restaurants aren't even owned by the same people. Now, imagine for a moment that your school year has started. And you know where we're going, right? A teacher, someone in the office, one of the students, maybe one of the students' parents test positive. What are the school's options? They can't just say, all right, Mrs. Lamb's class, you're all going, when your parents pick you up or when you go home today, don't come back for a week or 2 weeks. You're kidding. Or would they say, everybody in 4th grade, we had a couple, someone or a couple people test positive, we're going to be doing some contact tracing. Everybody in 4th grade, you stay home now for a week or 2 weeks or whatever the safe designation is. Sometimes it seems kind of arbitrary. So this is what I want to tell you guys, and anybody who watches this later. You don't have any control over your school district. They're going to do what they're going to do. You have a lot of control, though, and thankfully you live in the United States where homeschooling is legal in every single state. You can homeschool. You can take away that uncertainty because you don't have control over whether or not a school is going to shut down or what their reaction is going to be in the case of a coronavirus, positive case, even if it's asymptomatic and even if they find out in time that asymptomatic people are just scarcely contagious, doesn't even matter. Doesn't even matter. Do you want to have that much uncertainty moving into the fall and then beyond that? I don't know. I mean, I know there are a lot of families that will have literally no choice whatsoever. But as I was talking to my sister and she was expressing a little bit of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty, she was telling me, another friend of mine yesterday was saying that one of her clients is a principal and a lot of teachers, the older ones, they're retiring. They're retiring early and they're setting up businesses to help families homeschool. Yeah, so the world this time next summer, the world could look very, very, very different. Okay, very different. So if it's in the uncertainty that's getting to you, then I would suggest taking control of the one piece that you have control over, and then just make your plans. All right. Moving into the fall, if it turns out, I can't even predict. I mean, my brain is like, there's so many different ways this could go. But uh, if it turns out that things resume to normal pretty quickly, then you can say, you know, we're going to finish the semester homeschooled, and then we're going to go back into the, so you're not tied into anything. But I'm here to tell you that I think that the grown-up way, and I don't mean this as an insult, but the grown-up way is, the grown-up thinking is to accept there's so much of this I can't control, so I will control what I can. And I'm going to get off my soapbox with that. In our last group call, I talked about 4 different homeschooling options. Number 1, really quickly, go with your school district's plan, whatever it is. Okay, whatever they require you to do, whatever materials, go with that. That's one option you have. Another one is to go with a K-12 virtual academy. And these have become more popular over the years. They don't have a track record of, you would think, but they don't have a track record of huge academic success among their students. And I'm not sure why that would be. But when we were looking up, I was curious, you know, thinking that, oh my goodness, you know, the reading levels are going to be higher, the math levels are going to be higher. That doesn't seem to be the case. That doesn't even reflect negatively on the virtual academy. Maybe it's just, you know, the people who sign up for those would be the households where the kids aren't going to get any kind of supervision anyway, and whether they go to public school or something different. So I don't know. But the K-12 Virtual Academy, they will give you all the curriculum. It's funded by the public school, the federal government, and that is how they're funded, but it's free for you, and that is a big draw for some people. Traditional homeschooling, even within this traditional homeschooling, there are tons of options. So you can pay some pretty big bucks. I would say many hundreds of dollars, you know, upwards of maybe $1,000, $1,500 or so for one student, for a complete prepackaged curriculum. All of the workbooks, all the textbooks, all the video lessons, etc., that you would ever want. And you can do that. I did that kind of sort of for about 1.5 years. And it was okay, but after that year, then once we moved into the second year, we had workbook stuff just out the wazoo, and I was like, what? All we're doing is workbooks. So we moved into something else. So the prepackaged all-in-one program, there are a lot of those around, and you can just kind of start doing a search. And I actually have a link for a very comprehensive list of curriculum in different areas. And I'll try to remember to put that on Facebook, and let me make a note, and put it out in an email. Okay, email, homeschool. Hopefully this cryptic note will be enough to remind me. The other way that I think most people end up homeschooling is the eclectic style. And that is where you don't, all your materials, they're not from just one publisher. So we went through Saxon Math, Singapore Math, Math UC, I think back to Saxon, and then into teaching textbooks, all just for math. And at some grade levels, it really worked. Saxon Math was really good, I think, in kindergarten and into first grade. And then it became just a little bit too much intimidating for my daughter, because just lengthy pages of rote math facts that she had to do quickly. And it just was, so from there we went into Singapore Math. So you have lots and lots and lots of options, but probably you'll end up having just an eclectic approach. You know, some parent you may read in a forum, a homeschooling forum, hey, we're doing this, it's working out well for us, you check it out, and I like that idea. Okay, so it's really important, I mentioned before in my previous session, it's really important to keep the word in mind, pivot. When you homeschool, you can pivot at any moment. I think that is almost like a superpower as a homeschool parent, because you can watch your kids, and when they're struggling with something, you can find out ways to make it work. Can we do, less time, more time? Can we move faster through this? Can we get something supplemental? And then if none of that works, you might, okay, I'm going to start looking for another math curriculum. I'm going to look for something different, for a foreign language. And then you just pivot, all right? So that, I think, is, like I said, maybe a superpower. And you get better and better at that. The other one, the other option, traditional homeschooling, unschooling. And unschooling doesn't really rely on textbooks. There would be reading, just it's very much experiential type learning, child-centered learning. And I have known some fabulous unschooling parents. You know, I think the parents who do best with unschooling are the ones who are almost like children themselves. They just want to explore the world. They just have this wonderment about them where they want to know. And if their kid is digging in the backyard and digging into dirt and finding different rocks or finding what bugs, lie under a log, the parent is down there, on their hands and knees, kind of digging through it too. So I think with unschooling, it really is just, I like the idea. I mean, we didn't unschool. Maybe it's because I was in public school, but for so many years. But nevertheless, those are some options. Real quick, I do want to put a plug in for something that I have online. It's called Survival Mom Summer Camp. And as I was thinking about this, I thought, if you don't know at all where to start, and I know, Tana, you're going through summer camp, then what we have is kind of wilderness survival based. And so we've had lessons on tying knots. This week we have a lesson on making char cloth, which is a fire starter. Next week, we're going to be talking about first aid with duct tape. And so there are hands-on activities every single time. And so if you have really struggled and you just feel nervous about getting started, this would be very much hands-on, very activity-oriented, and fun. And it really is suitable, I would say, for most members of the family, everybody, not just the kids. If you go to thesurvivalmom.com/summer camp, you'll see all the information and the details. It's $47. And with the $47, you get all the lessons. We've had a handful of lessons in the past. We have some new live lessons coming up in the future. And so that will carry you through into September at least, as far as having a bank of activities. I also mentioned in my previous sessions with you, getting started, the importance of getting started right now, even if it seems awkward. All right, I understand the awkwardness. No homeschool parent, I don't think, ever, launches into this and they just feel 100% confident, because there are a lot of, you're walking down a road that is unique to you and your family. So of course it's going to feel awkward. Okay, so embrace the awkwardness. That's the best advice I could give you. So, but if you start, and I'm going to give you some tips in just a moment for getting started right now, but if you get started right now, even if it's just in your own head, you don't even have to tell your kids. In your own head, you're thinking, okay, Monday, we start homeschooling. That's brilliant, because when it's time to officially homeschool in the fall, you won't be bumbling and stumbling, and now what do I do? Because you will already have been homeschooling. You'll know what pitfalls to expect. You might say, oh, well, we had a read aloud time, and I had, my 5-year-old was running circles and, pretending to be an airplane, and it made it really, really hard to concentrate and focus. Well, that, you discovered something important. How are you going to keep that 5-year-old occupied? And what can you put in place for the 5-year-old? That will be something that his or her at their age level. Let me see. I also highly recommend putting in place routines, morning routines, evening routines. So again, when the school year starts, you'll have a morning routine. Everybody gets up by a certain time, has, 3 or 4 or 5 tasks to so they take on the day, and so do you. And then maybe in the morning at a certain time, you say, hey, we're just going to go for a walk in the neighborhood. And today, I want you to look for types of flowers. This time, let's see if we can find butterflies or bees. And let's see if we can, so you can just kind of bring nature into it, but it's also getting out and doing something. I would say with teenagers, if they can be in an activity, if they can kayak or swim, but even if it's a sport, even if it's something that they're doing, anything outside, kind of incorporate that, because the curriculum that we ended up using, and if I have time, I'll show you, it was very much outdoor oriented and nature oriented. And it was really, it was just the perfect thing for us. Your kids, they're also getting used to the idea of homeschooling, whether they know it or not. So in the morning, they know, they wake up at a certain time. And honestly, I have been waking up later and later and later through this whole stupid pandemic thing. And So it's not like I'm, I'm in the boat with everybody else. But if you have a certain time, I don't care if it's 10 o'clock, well, everybody, we're going to get started by this time. And I need you to have these 3 tasks done. We're going to all meet together and do this activity together. Your kids will be getting used to a routine, which is important when you homeschool. Even if you homeschool in the evenings, even if you homeschool on long commutes, they need to just kind of get into the rhythm of a routine. And so you're going to start doing that this summer. And it's going to be, I think it'll be easier. And you know what? I think that maybe deep down, a lot of us are anxious for a routine. Okay? So we have been kind of in this epidemic, quarantine mode since March, and the hours and the days flow together. Every day is just like the day before in my house. And I easily procrastinate putting things off. And I think a lot of us, and kids too, the idea of just something to do, having a schedule again, I think it's going to be refreshing. Okay. So a couple things. To get started, I mentioned read alouds. I mentioned this a couple of sessions ago. Read alouds start with just something of interest. It doesn't have to be an educational book. So I read out loud the entire Percy Jackson series to my kids. I would read them on road trips, and then after we were done with Percy Jackson, whatever the next character was, by that same author, we went into those books. One of my daughter's very favorite books is called The Pinderwicks. Excellent book. The Pinderwicks. It's so good. And there was a sequel that came out a little bit later. But they don't necessarily, you're not going to bring, haul out something like this, Miracle at Philadelphia, unless you're going to be doing on a road trip to Philadelphia or something. But the books that you just read aloud, it can be for fun. And now here is really something really important to know, and it may surprise you. Your child's listening comprehension is much higher than their reading comprehension. So it would be okay for you to start reading The Hobbit, for example, if your kids are 8 or 9 or 10 and you're thinking, there is no way that a book like that, they could never read that. Their listening comprehension is going to just race ahead, because I don't even know I have no idea research-wise what the year's difference is, but I do know that you can read to kids at a much higher level than they would be able, at least initially, to sit down and read for themselves. Let's see, I'm just going to pull this up. I don't think I'm going to pull this up. The website with the curriculum that we use, let me type it in here, AmblesideOnline.com. Now, AmblesideOnline.com, it's not just a curriculum, but it actually follows the educational philosophy of a woman educator who established, I believe, 3 schools, maybe 3 or 4 schools in England in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. Her name was Charlotte Mason. You will probably hear about Charlotte Mason techniques, Charlotte Mason aligned curriculum, but Ambleside Online follows pretty faithfully Charlotte Mason's curriculum from all those years ago. She was very, very, very much into nature. She believed that children needed to be outside, they needed to be exploring. Let me tell you really, really quickly, as a former teacher, this is what impressed me. When I taught school, 7th and 8th and 4th grades, whenever I assigned a paper, didn't matter how long it was, the kids had a hard time putting things in their own words. And we would walk through, one lesson, maybe a day on, now you're going to be, tell me what your topic is for your research. Okay, kind of teach them how to figure out a good topic. Now we're going to go to the library, and I want you to find books on that topic. And then maybe spend a couple of class lessons teaching them how to take notes. And then the time comes where they submit it, and you're like, gosh darn it, this is like word for word. They might as well have just gone to Wikipedia and copied and pasted. What's the problem? The problem is that taking in information from one source or multiple sources, and then formulating it in your own head, in your own words, is a very, very high level of thinking. It doesn't just happen because you got an assignment to write a research paper. So let me tell you what Charlotte Mason did, and I want you to add this to your summer homeschooling, okay? What she did instead is that for the maybe first, second, third grades, she pretty much had people or students dictate. And dictate is you would say, okay, here I have Dr. Doolittle, okay? So I might say to my kid, I want you to read, you start with really short passages, okay? I just want you to read, maybe this first page. And when you're done, I want you to come and tell me about it. Tell me all about it, everything you can remember. And what they're doing is they are putting into their own words a summary of what they read. Instead of having just to sit down and now I have to write a long paper. Oh, Mrs. Bedford said that this paper has to be 5 pages long. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So they just start copying material. All right, when you do that, both of my kids actually got really good at this. You just kind of make the passage a little bit longer, where now it's, maybe, okay, I want you to read up to this page, or maybe I want you to read this entire chapter. Take it easy, because it actually is fun to read something and then go and hurry and tell somebody all about it. Okay? I mean, haven't you ever watched a movie that was really good, or you watched a TV show, or you read a book yourself, and it's like, oh, I want to tell someone about it. Well, what you're going to do is when you tell somebody about it, you're going to be putting all of that, the anecdotes or the facts, and you're going to just kind of, your brain will just kind of summarize all those together, and you're dictating. So I want you to do the read aloud time, and you can actually have them dictate to what they read aloud. Okay, so the important thing is to engage the brain where you're really taking them up slowly to a much higher level of thinking. And then when the time comes, you might say, okay, I want you to read, we can backtrack a little bit. I want you to read these 2 pages in Dr. Doolittle. And now what I want you to do is think about how you would tell me about it. But this time I just want you to write, a couple sentences, or just write down some words, that come to mind. If you were going to come and tell me, but today I want you to just put it on paper. And slowly work toward where they're writing it. That was one of the most valuable things I got out of learning from Charlotte Mason. Let's see. Oh, my daughter made a note here. She said she really never even took much formal grammar, but she is one of the best writers in high school. Her high school online teachers would use her papers, as examples for the other kids. Don't know what the other kids thought about that. She's an excellent, excellent writer, moved into college, easily writing whatever papers were required of her. So as you do the read aloud, it's going to teach vocabulary. Those little ears are going to pick up on all these words. And you might even say, hey, if I read a word out loud and you're not sure what it is, just ask me. All right, and we're going to get that figured out together. So the vocabulary they learn, the sentence structures, when they begin reading on their own, they're going to be recognizing spelling. And you might not, my son did very little in the way of formal spelling tests. And he spells very, very well. I attribute that to pretty much reading aloud and then the reading that he did. Something else I mentioned just very briefly, and I'll just mention it briefly again, but nature study. So start with read aloud, then have your kids come and tell you, read alouds and some, reading on their own, come and tell you about. That's dictation. Then the next thing would be nature study. And depending on where you live, my goodness, you can go on walks, draw. You can even find books, how to draw flowers or how to draw leaves or how to draw fairies, just start anywhere with those. And there are actually a lot of free art lessons online. So you're incorporating really the whole child. And by drawing, what they're doing is not just drawing, they're learning about color, they're learning to look for details. And as they just learn and become very, very observant, and you know how observant kids are, that is just going to help them in a lot of other areas. Let me see. I have a lot of notes here. I want to make sure I leave time for questions, but I'm going to schedule another one of these for next week, all right? And maybe even 2, so we will see how that goes. I would also recommend just some kind of, over in the group chat, Karina mentions what they're doing for routine. Thank you, Karina. some kind of a field trip. You don't, I mean, it doesn't matter if you call it a field trip or not, but just something just to get away. And again, you're going to be talking about what you see. Don't be the parent. In fact, you may actually have to re-educate yourself and get yourself off your phone. So you're really experiencing all of this with your kids. I can actually see, if, when my kids were homeschooling, we didn't have smartphones until they were much older. But I'm on my phone checking my email. I'm on my phone checking this, checking that. And I think I would personally have to retrain myself. Wait a minute. I have this little tiny person here. They're all excited because they saw a black and a blue butterfly for the first time in their life. And here I am. Really? So I think homeschooling also has to we have to be reminded, what kind of homeschooling parent do we want to be? One that's distracted, and one where it's like, oh, go teach yourself. In my last session, I talked about developing independent learners, but that is not really the same as just you being engrossed in a phone. Okay, so Tina says there are links to Amazon Charlotte Mason books, and some are on sale today. The nice thing about the Ambleside Online curriculum for every grade level, and Ambleside Online goes by year, not necessarily by grade. So if your child might be in maybe second grade, maybe third grade, you might look at the book selections and say, I think we need to start our Ambleside back in year 1. So you might look at the books and look at the requirements and say, they can read, but no one is, the Ambleside doesn't matter. You or the parent, you can pick where you start and how fast you go and slow you go. And my daughter types in here, she's working on her podcast today. My daughter types that experiences trump just sit down textbook education. When you look back to your own childhood, I read this fact many decades ago. When you ask someone about their childhood and what they remember, one of the top memories are family vacations. I don't know if that's true for you or not, but when I look back, I remember so well the camping trips. My dad was horrible about putting up tents. It was a good thing my Uncle Duffy was with us because he was very much an outdoorsman. My dad was not. I remember my mom, she read in a magazine to use Jell-O as a hair conditioner. So she mixed up this cherry red Jell-O, put it all in her hair, put a shower cap over it, and went to lay down because I guess she had to leave her hair for 15, 20 minutes or whatever. And she woke up screaming, or she jumped up screaming because her head was covered with ants. Well, no kid is ever going to forget that. So you really, all of us learn by experiences. My summer camp has a lot of experiences, but camping, family bike rides, going for walks, all of this stuff, it can be very, very free. So during this time, you're going to be observing your kids. Their attention span. Is one kid an auditory learner, another kid a kinesthetic? Do they have to just constantly, they learn just by doing? That's just how they learn better. Some people learn very, very well by reading. How about you? Do you know your learning style? Do you learn best? If you got a new piece of equipment, let's say a new cell phone, okay? Are you going to sit down and read the little help manual? Are you going to go on the website and maybe watch a video that shows you all the features of your new phone? Are you going to maybe listen to a podcast where some tech writer is explaining all about this new phone? Or are you going to grab the phone and just fumble around until you figure it out? That would be me. So as you work with your kids over the next several weeks and into the school year, you're going to get to know their learning style, which is very valuable. My daughter can just listen and pick things up incredibly. My son has to be handling things. And so he's going to figure out, like with math, some people can just sit down and you just show them on a little chalkboard or piece of paper, here's how you do the problem, boom, they're off. Others, you're going to want to have manipulatives, little things. It can be toothpicks, it can be little plastic teddy bears, and you kind of group them, and that's how they understand, math concepts, by just handling things and then moving from one column to another, as they're doing long division, for example. So it really is helpful. My daughter pointed out here in my notes, she says, what helped me with my enthusiasm for learning was when mom or dad would get excited and discuss things with me. And so there you have a little bit of a testimonial. So I think kind of your to-do list from here, if you haven't watched my previous two homeschool, getting started with homeschool lessons, they're both on YouTube. They will, all of these as well will be on my Facebook page. If you go to Facebook and just type in The Survival Mom, you'll see in the video section the last 3 video lessons, including this one. So get started right now. That's my best piece of advice. Start with reading aloud. Start with a routine. If your kids can, get them reading if they can. But I mean, I think all of you, there aren't very many of you who have the very, very little kids, but give them some quiet reading time. And then start asking them after read alouds, and then after they read on their own, tell me about it. You know, what are you reading? I know, you know, the book cover, this is a good book here, Mountain Born. All right, you were reading some of Mountain Born. Well, tell me about it. And now they're dictating. They don't even realize that what they're doing is putting into their own words, you know, the concepts. Interestingly, when I asked my son to dictate from a very early age, he would dictate. I guess his memory is just pretty amazing, because he would dictate like he was memorizing. That's how good his memory was, just memorizing. And I would be like, at first it freaked me out. I was like, oh my gosh, you know, what kind of kid do I have here? But his memory just worked that well. So I don't know if he would be a visual learner, you know, or what, but you're going to see all these differences in your kids. And then don't be afraid to pivot. All right. We talked about getting out into nature, taking advantage. My Survival Mom Summer Camp, if that is something that can give you tools to kind of move forward in a very fun way with your kid. Otherwise, you can look up books on wilderness, you know, survival skills, or how to tie knots, go on a camping trip, whatever outdoor activities, you know, you have access to. And I think we talked about going to hslda.org, looking up your state requirements, as well as seeing if you can possibly find local Facebook groups. Okay. Let me go through a few questions. It looks like we have trying to keep these to about an hour. So let me see. So we have Karina's notes. I'm going to read the notes Karina, that you wrote. And she says about routine, she says, we begin the school day by reviewing the date. Karina, how old is your son? Maybe first grade? I think he's pretty young. Reviewing the date with a calendar. And we copied this from the teacher at the school. So this is part of the public school.
He's 7.
He's 7. Okay.
He's 7. He has the mind of a 12 years old and the body of 7 years old. He's a second grader right now. Yeah.
Right. That sounds about right for second grade, or first or kindergarten for that matter. They talk about the day of the week, the month, the year, the weather, what season it is. We pray and then review the goals for the day. He doesn't like literature and phonics, so we begin with his favorite subject, math, to get him motivated and energized. Then we work on that subject after the first break before he gets tired. Some days it works, some days it doesn't, and we've all been there. You just, let me tell you something you probably don't know. In the public school world, it is almost unheard of for a teacher or a class to get through every textbook all the way to the end. Never happens. It used to drive me nuts when I was a classroom teacher. I would be like, dang, we only got 2/3 of the way through the book and it's May already. You know, you take off time to study for the, you know, whatever the testing situation is at the school, you know, that might be 3 weeks worth, maybe more, you know, where you're all studying for the standardized tests. But almost no public school class or teacher was going to get through every single textbook all the way to the end. And so knowing that, and knowing how much time is taken out from standardized tests, how much time is taken away when there are disruptive kids in the classroom, all the interruptions of the day, a teacher trying to help one student who's struggling, and then over here you have kids, you know, they finished their assignments last week and they want to know, now what do we do? That's a hard job. Okay, since it's going to be pretty much one-on-one, or, you know, you have 2 kids or 3 kids, even if you have 5 kids, you're going to be able to really monitor their progress, and you're going to know just immediately who is struggling, you know, who's trying to, you know, BS their way through, you know, through a lesson or whatever. And homeschool kids are not perfect. I have one in my kitchen right now. Another one, Annie says a lot of families are withdrawing and planning to homeschool. I'm hearing that more and more, Annie. Who knew that that would be a just kind of as this whole kind of thing has just been cascading. Who would have thought back in March that, you know, maybe millions of families would say, we're just going to homeschool. Let's see. Oh, Cheryl says remote learning was awful. We had 8 hours of worksheets. We had to pick up weekly and send back. There was limited stuff online. It was frustrating and crazy. I don't know many parents who teach like teachers at school do. We did not have options. It was just over and over doing the same stuff, kind of like busy work. Yeah. And then Hong says, my kid's school only has one choice, back to school in person in the fall. Mask is optional. Her son has asthma. Let's see. Annie says she's an admissions director at a private school, planning to open as we did. But what you're speaking to is our biggest fear, and that is the COVID-19 cases popping up here and there. Someone asked about registering under an umbrella school. There are some states where that is either required or an option. And I know in some states what parents will do is that they will just establish their home as a private school. And the guidelines will be there on the state website. Maybe they're detailed over on hslda.org. So I remember reading about umbrella schools, Hong, but I don't think I can answer that and give it justice just because it's been so many years. So, but I do know that some parents, they just say, okay, this is the name of our homeschool. Or, you know, if you have to register, you know, as a private school, we have a homeschool, but it's a private school, depending on what the criteria are in your state. And let me ask, Hong, you said that you were totally freaking out. Do you feel any better whatsoever right now? I hope so. I hope so. Okay, let's go ahead and I'm going to just kind of wind this up. This will be on YouTube and it will also be on my Facebook page. I will be in touch both on Facebook as well as via email with next week's schedule. How's that? And we will do this hand in hand, all right? Keep me up to date with your questions, whatever it is you learn, whatever it is you try. I want you to be trying something, okay? How many of you say over in chat, Lisa, I am going to start homeschooling Monday? Are you brave enough to do that? Let me know. Are you brave enough to say I'm going to start homeschooling Monday? I'm going to sit down with my kid or my kids and we're just going to read out loud something. That's all you have to do. Do that for a week. Do it for 2 weeks. And you'll be homeschooling. And then give yourself a big pat on the back. Oh, good. So Cheryl got started. Hong feels better. Do that and then be sure to do the dictation piece. So do the dictation. You know, you're reading a chapter, James and the Giant Peach, and you read just a page, 2 pages, and, you know, get started small. You know, tell me about what I just read. You know, what do you think about that character? And just really get them engaged. Okay, Tina says she homeschools her son every summer. Excellent. All right, if I can be of more help, please let me know. And I'm going to end the call now, but I will be in touch with our next date and time. Bye, everybody.